If you're the type of person that finds yourself worrying quite a bit about things like robots and artificial intelligence replacing humans, sort of turning us into just more and more mincemeat underneath the grinding wheels of technology, if you will, if that helps you, I might point you in the direction of the 2021 Atlantic League season if you'd like to see maybe a glimmer of hope for the way that, possibly might turn out. And that, maybe people aren't so replaceable, and at least not all of us. Because if you don't know why we're talking about this, Buster Olney tweeted out on Thursday night, and of course it was Thursday night because I was about to record this episode. Now I'm recording on Friday, which is a headache for many, many issues, but I know it's not about me, so we're going to move right along. But he tweeted out that all the AAA leagues in minor league baseball, the two AAA leagues, would be using a form of Robozone, which we'll get into what that means in a second. But that immediately conjured up a lot of feelings and a lot of memories that we can't forget from the Atlantic League Robozone era. And automatic balls and strikes, as it is officially known, came to the league in 2019 at the All-Star Game. People kind of tend to forget it because it was pre-COVID, but the Robozone was there before. And immediately it was a garbage fire. And it did not clean itself up all the way through 2021. It just got, in many ways, it got worse. It was really exposed. It was tough. To sort of quickly walk back through what went down. The immediate thing that was found was pitchers could dominate on the Robozone because you start to think of weird things like things you don't think about. What's the shape of the strike zone? And your automatic response is, well, it's like kind of a rectangle, from the top and bottom limitations to the 18-inch width of the plate. It's like, okay, but really it's, what about where the ball crosses that line? We know the box that kind of sits over home, but like, what if that ball crosses the strike zone only, halfway past the batter or halfway across home plate? So immediately there were a lot of things you don't think about because it was using the technical strike zone to call balls and strikes, which allows for a lot of strangeness. All the ball had to do was touch the zone a little bit. And the zone was in ways bigger than we would think, because if you're a batter, you're at the back of the batter's box. Imagine yourself as the batter. You're in the batter's box. You're at the back end of it. Home plate is almost entirely in front of you. Now, what constitutes the outside corner, low outside corner, that's a long way away. Now, that's not an issue when it's a pitch that, has to go all the way across the plate like a fastball. But if you throw like a diving breaking ball, it can technically, we found, and pitchers very quickly found, because they're quick learners, don't let them fool you, that a breaking ball can clip that front corner just ever so slightly, the very front edge, the front black of home plate, the bottom left corner of the strike zone, and dive. That thing can hit the dirt by the time the catcher gets it, and it's a strike. Technically, it's a strike, and let's acknowledge that. Okay, technically, it's a strike. But practically, can it be hit? Because the thing about a strike zone is it's pitches that can be hit. No, it could not. We saw it all the time. And the alternative was step up in the box. And okay, now what are you doing with the fastball? So it got bad quick. That prompted some sort of redesigning of the strike zone, sort of making a more optimized version of it, one that can work better with what we've got going on here. Now, once that was shored up, and there's sort of some harder boundaries figured out, so sort of take the edge off, sort of nerfed it against the pitchers, if you will, we had the 2021 season. And if you don't remember the 2021 Atlantic League season, there was a ton of offense. Some of it was, pitching wasn't easy to come by, post-pandemic chaos. But a lot of it was, there were so many walks. And not all of that could be pinned on pitching. For one, we had lots of walks because the zone was so tight. And then what would result was, okay, so I don't want to walk this guy, really got to throw one over the plate to get a call to strike, which causes you to throw one right into the barrel so often. So now you have to choose between likely walking guys or likely getting balls pretty squared up if you're having a bad day and you're not, the best of the best in the league. Not great for the squad. Not a great product, by the way. You're like, oh, sweet, offense in baseball. Nope. Games were like 4 hours that year. It was brutal. So basically, things had gone from bad to worse. And that's sort of where it stayed, really, being honest about it. There was the added mess of sometimes it would glitch and the umpire would have the earpiece in and it would say like ball or strike, and he wouldn't think that. But so many weird calls had been made already by the Robozone that you kind of just go, yeah, strike, or yeah, ball, and just roll with it, and everyone looks at you. But I mean, you could see it online if you're tracking the game. It's a strike or it's a ball, and it was called wrong. So there were so many issues. There's so many inconsistencies. And if I were to get in every individual incident, but it was pretty wild. Now we are still messing with it. And my thoughts on this before we move on, because it isn't technically indie ball talk, but it is talk about like the purpose of indie ball and something that drives me pretty crazy here. Because again, messing with indie ball, messing with the rules, adjusting all these things is to, better baseball or whatever. And I can get on board with that because I'm first and foremost a baseball fan. I want good things for the sport. But it drives you a little bit crazy because only half are using the zone as the Atlantic League used it, or some form of the zone as the Atlantic League used it. I'm sure they've shifted it further and messed again with what's a ball, what's a strike, which is fine. But half the league is going to use the challenge system. And if you know the challenge system, it is, by all accounts, spectacular. Basically, all pitches, like in tennis, like a ball in tennis, it's being tracked. And if a call is made by the umpire on the field, the home plate ump, and the batter disagrees, I believe it's the batter, the catcher, or the pitcher are the three, that call can be challenged, but it can only be challenged a limited number of times per game. And they'll go up to the booth very quickly, like immediately. All right, challenge is activated. It will go to the scoreboard. That's where I saw it. I mean, I think it was a fall league game where I saw that. So who knows, because that's at MLB Park. But at its best, it's up to the video board, and it will show like the virtual version of the pitch coming in and whether or not it clips the zone. And it has that like energy of tennis where they replay whether the shot is in or out. And it's like, gets people hype. It grows some tension. I saw one where the game ended on one, and it was it had the vibe of a walk-off because of the anticipation. It was a strike and everyone lost it. That has been great. There is a lingering question, which, you can argue on your own, of which one changes the game more if you're a purist. I mean, does adding more challenges change the game more? That adds a whole different strategy and component. But challenges already do exist on other types of plays. You could also argue, the zone is the zone. It's always been the zone. We're actually using Robozone, just enforcing that. But involving taking would be the better word, taking the human element completely out of balls and strikes, I would argue would be changing the game even further than just putting a challenge system in a different place in the game than we already have it. So those are the two sides there. But where my frustration comes in, to summarize this, because we've gone longer than I wanted to already on this, and we have an interview to get to, is the fact that when we're sold these weird ideas to test out indie ball, it's because MLB wants to try it. And that is what they did. They learned lessons, I'm sure. But anyone who was there can tell you this was a bad idea. So why is it that we are still testing a bad idea? Unless the Atlantic League, I guess, wasn't good enough to test it in fully. It makes me wonder what that was all for. Especially because I bet it's going to be a garbage fire again. I've heard from the leagues that used it this year was also a garbage fire. So not really like they've improved much. But it also annoys me a little bit when it comes to things like, okay, the challenge system is cool, but the Atlantic League didn't get to test the challenge system. Maybe it was offered to them. I don't know. Maybe because they didn't use the zone this year. So maybe they said, no, that's enough of that. But it's just like, I can tell you what the better vibe is. Anyone who's seen both can tell you what the better one is. And it's sort of frustrating just to see that the biggest test that the leagues have had thus far seems to be the strike zone, and seems to have been just to prove that one sucks and we're still going to try it anyway. And that's what frustrates me. To close this out, summarizing my thoughts, Meg Rowley from Fangraphs had a great back-to-back tweet that I reposted, but she says it very succinctly. So if you're wondering still what kind of the difference is, the challenge system, efficient, beautiful, inspired, the full Robozone, cold, destined to make fans angry in a new, different way, here to kill John Connor. And that is, yeah. And she added, having witnessed the challenge system back in Fall League, it was quick and took care of bad misses. It adds a new strategic wrinkle without presenting a wildly different zone than the one fans are used to, which, boy, if you think you're not going to be peeved at the strike zone anymore, and y'all, if you want to get rid of the frustration with the strike zone, I will tell you now, the Robozone is not your move. the challenge system is probably your move. Anyway, let's move right along because we can't just, I can't keep talking about the Robozone. I spent a lot of 2021 talking about Robozone. I can't do it anymore. There was a Lancaster saga, that game that had like 30-something walks. Turns out it wasn't calibrated right, but nobody wanted to acknowledge that. But I knew that, and I knew the guy who knew that. Don't get me started. There was a conspiracy cover-up. We'll talk about that later another time. We'll just talk about Indy ball cover-ups a whole episode. Put on tinfoil hats and get weird. I'm glad we talked about the Atlantic League, though, because I really got nothing else, because they still aren't posting their transactions or publicizing them. Gastonia had 3 this week. I sort of tweeted about them. I think I referenced them already, too, so I'm just going to keep it moving. But that's the Atlantic League for you. Good job. To the Frontier League. Yes, the Frontier League. I switched up this time. I want to go Frontier League, and then I'm going to go American Association. The Evansville Otters, they made some signings. They signed outfielders Jeffrey Baez and Noah Myers, and they released catcher John Anthon and infielder Tanner Craig. Jeffrey Baez returns for his 3rd season with Evansville. In his 104 games with the Otters, he has slashed .261, .334, and .566. Good for a 125 OPS plus and 4.8 WAR over that time. Very nicely done. Now, much of that success is from his 22-game stint with Evansville in 2021. And you might be thinking like, man, like just 22 games out of 104. Like, how is a lot of his success from that? Well, you should see the numbers he put up. They were pretty wild. They were enough to weigh that 125 OPS pretty nicely. But he projects to bounce back after a tough 2022 season, but not quite to that 2021 level. And he will be filling a classified or a veteran classified spot on that roster. If you want to know what that means, check back to the last episode where we talked about what the different roster rules are in different leagues. And hopefully that'll help you out. On the other side, Noah Myers, he's fresh out of college. He's looking at a rookie spot, so that's nicely done. It's always good to get a solid rookie, especially out of a good college program. And he is very interesting because he had a great start to his 2020 season at South Carolina pre-COVID, but then struggled in 2021. He bounced back last season, but he did so in the Big South with USC Upstate rather than with South Carolina in the SEC. So he's a bit of a mixed bag. Not really sure what to make of him. Projections put him at just below league average offensively. I think that would be a good start for him in the league. He has the potential to actually be an above average weapon in the lineup, but his lowest end projections are brutal. I'll tell you that much. So at some point I'll get to a point where my YouTube viewers, you'll be able to see the projections, but I mean, I got to go one graphic at a time here. So, but if you really like the projections, we're going to do a whole projections breakdown at some point and talk about every team and all their projected starters and what they're looking at. So projecting projections of projections that we're going to deal with. But again, that's going to be someone to keep an eye on in Evansville, because he could go very well or very poorly or somewhere in between. Probably going to be somewhere in between, but a good sort of first year guy to grab for as a flyer in the Frontier League. So you like to see that early on from Evansville. In an additional different, I'm going to call it different move, Rick Corti was added by the Otters. He's a retired CEO turned motivational speaker who's going to be on the coaching staff. From the press release about it says, Corti, and I think it's Corti, sorry if I'm wrong on that one, but Corti will serve as a character coach, helping players and coaches set personal goals and become better men, both on and off the baseball field. It continued to say another part of Corti's role will be to assist players and coaches who want professional advice when preparing to enter the workforce, whether that be for a job in the offseason or for their post-playing careers. I don't know what to think of that. I don't know. I'm just bringing it to you. I don't know. I want to make fun of it. For sure, I want to make fun of it. I want to make fun of it so bad. Bro, you got a motivational speaker on your coaching staff with what would appear to be no baseball experience. It seems like rich friend of owner gets job. That's the vibe I get. And he's preparing you for life after baseball, like just fully skipping on the whole maybe I'll make the show thing. Bad vibe in Evansville. But he's probably a nice guy. So like, I don't know. I hope it's good. I hope it's, and on it too, I don't hate it. Like I hold two thoughts on this. One is, what are we doing? The whole thought process I just went through, just rambled on. The other one though is, I mean, yeah, probably a good idea. Probably a good idea to have someone who like helps boys become men. And not only that, boys become, adults. And also, people who aren't going, who a lot of these guys aren't going to, all right, a lot of these guys ain't going to the show. Duh. So it is good to prepare them for after and help them, with being a professional beyond the baseball field. But I don't know. It feels weird. So I'd love to know your thoughts. Comment that. I don't know what to think about it. Or tweet at me. Whatever. You can find me a multitude of ways. Moving right along to Three Rivers. And yes, I said it in English. Come and do something about it. They added catcher Oscar Hernandez, not the former major leaguer. I would assume. I mean, I don't have any hard proof of that, but like, let's be real. An outfielder, Rodrigo Aroxa. It's Oroczo. That's my attempt. Neither of them appear to have professional experience, so they'll be rookies on the roster. The New Jersey Jackals added catchers Arusber Estrada, former legend. He has the PJ Phillips connection there. And Isaias Quirzo, Quiroz. Man, tough day for the names with me. I think they already had at least 2 catchers on the roster, unless I missed their release at some point. But I think so. I'm not sure of the plan there. Actually, I think they did initially pick up the contracts and extend the contracts of 3 catchers. So who knows what's going on this roster at this point in time. But yeah, 2 signed. I don't have projections on them yet, but something to keep an eye on. The Jackals also signed Roniel Rhodes. My God, what's going on today? Roniel Raudes. I want to say Roniel Rhodes. And that's what we're going to roll with until I'm corrected. He pitched tremendously last season out of the York bullpen. Enough that you'd think I'd know since I was covering the league, but the league was busy last year, so I'm just one man. I'm trying my best. He made like a dozen maybe appearances. Don't get on me about it. But he pitched really well. That's a good pickup for the Jackals, so good for them. The Windy City Thunderbolts signed infielder Carson Matthews and lefty Adrian Reese. Windy City also traded infielder Peyton Robertson to the Pioneer League's Northern Colorado Owls for a player to be named later, so we'll watch for the second half of that deal to come through sometime in the next 70 years. The Quebec Capitales, I tried my best, signed reliever Franklin Hernandez. That's an easy name. I appreciate that. The Schaumburg Boomers signed reliever Luis Perez to an extension and released outfielder Clint Hardy. Over in the American Association, the Lincoln Salt Dogs signed catcher Luke Roscom and reliever Carson Lance. Gary South Shore signed reliever Matt Leon. He looked great with the Boulders, by the way, in the Frontier League last season. He can touch the mid-90s, so that's exciting. The Sioux Falls Canaries will bring back utility guy Mike Hart. After 4 seasons with Sioux Falls, Mike appeared in the Atlantic League and American last year. He did have an injury problem. I think he was with, once I guess, Estonia. I could be off on that one. But yeah, he had an injury problem, bounced to the American Association later in the season. It wasn't a great year for him, so I'm sure he's back. He's happy to be back in Sioux Falls to an extent. I'm sure they're happy to have him. Fargo-Moorhead signed reliever Eric Ezerski. I just remember him from the Black Sox with Joe Torre and them, but I think he was pitching pretty well. I think he threw a no-hitter for them, actually, now that I think about it. So how about that? So maybe a good get there by Fargo. And they also signed catcher Ben Lavorsi. Lavorsi saw action in 35 games last season after leaving Minnesota State. He played tremendously. He slashed 340, 443, 524 to the tune of a 152 OPS plus. Super gross. Go off, young buck. But even the high-end projections this time have him falling back to earth a bit. We're talking about a guy, he hit like 245, 244 throughout college. I mean, after the stint that he had with the Red Hawks last season, you have to take a shot if you're Fargo-Moorhead. You have to bring him back, have to see what he's got long-term. But he played like 30-something games. You got to take a shot. He's an LS1 roster spot, so you can use them. It's a good use of it. Bring back a guy who's had a lot of success, but I just think it would be ill-advised to expect the same level of success from him over the long term here this season. But who knows? Maybe he's made some adjustments, and that's just who he is now, and he's a guy who rakes, and we'll never see him again after 1 month into the season because he gets signed by somebody. Lastly, I got the Lake Country Dockhounds signing outfielder Casey Dykstra. I could not track down whether he is a Dykstra family member. There's a lot of them bouncing around, so it's always tough to figure out. I think Southern Maryland had one who was a hitter, and he was a pitcher. One of those. So T's and P's to the Dykstra boys, because that's got to be a tough pull. I'm sure it's not, always weird attention coming from dad. Over to the Pioneer League, the Boise Hawks signed infielder Cole Kaler. The Great Falls Voyagers signed Brant Brown. He's a pitcher. And the Ogden Raptors signed a utility guy, Brandon Crosby. Crosby came straight from the NAIA Warner Southern to the Northern Colorado Owls last season, where he had made like an immediate impact. It was good, really good line, 302, 378, 519 with 11 homers. Now, he doesn't have a long, just like, I'm already going to what's his face him, Lavorsi. Just like Lavorsi, he doesn't have a long track record of hitting like that. So I do, again, doubt that he's going to reach quite that level this season, but projections do think his numbers will be good. In the Pioneer League, though, that could still leave him below average because the Pioneer League is such an offensive run environment, but he will be something to keep an eye on. I do think it's a good ad by Ogden at this point. A little interesting to see that he did not stay, actually, with Northern Colorado. Still a solid high potential signing for Ogden, though. Since we're talking about the Northern Colorado Owls, we might as well mention they did fill their coaching vacancy. They signed manager Frank Gonzalez. Gonzalez joins the Owls after 8 seasons in the Colorado Rockies organization. Just some notes on him. This will be his 4th as a manager, 3rd as a manager in the Pioneer League. He skippered the Grand Junction Rockies from 2016 to 2017 and the Boise Hawks then of the Northwest League in 2015. So he managed a current Pioneer League team before they were in the Pioneer League, and he managed a current Pioneer League team when they were in the Pioneer League, not Indy ball. So, loose connection. But yeah, I see it. Experienced manager, that's a good thing. Experience with that age too. But yeah, it's good to see. Yeah, should be good. Should be fine. I don't have a lot of thoughts on that, if I'm being honest with you. I think Northern Colorado has bigger issues as an organization. So, we'll see. Without dragging this out any further, it's time to get to our interview. Today,